Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the SSB Ground School. Tonight's session is the Land Out Database Open Forum, and we're very pleased to have a number of pilots joining us from Colorado Soaring Association, Black Forest, Soaring Society, and also we've seen a couple pilots who fly in the back slope who aren't necessarily members of any of the clubs, but do a lot of cross-country soaring, and we're looking forward to participation from everybody. Clemens has graciously put together most of the format for tonight. He's done a tremendous amount of research on land out places. A lot of them are airports. Some of them are private airports. Some of them are just fields, and so they kind of get ranked by order of where you really want to land. And obviously, if you can land on a true airport, that's a first choice. But we're not really covered with airports, especially when you get up into the mountain areas. Now, maybe if you go out into eastern Colorado, there's a lot more designated airports out there. But anyway, so since we don't really have a lot of announcements tonight, I'm just going to turn this over to Clemens. He has prepared an extensive presentation for us, and I hope you all will enjoy what he has to say. And it is open for participation. We want to hear from pilots who have seen these land out fields from the ground and can give us some guidance on whether or not they're good places to land. So with that, Clemens, would you take it away, please?
Sure. Thank you, Armand. Well, I mean, I really want to make this a conversation, but it will be a little bit of a guided conversation. I tried to figure out how to do this with 50 people on Zoom. So if we can just simply open it up for everybody and say, where would you land out? It wouldn't go anywhere. So I thought I'll try and put together some guided presentation where we go through where do we actually fly, and where do we need fields to land, and then look at fields in particular. Then we take a look at a tool that might help us do a crowdsourced effort if we're so inclined. So I will demo that tool, and we'll show you how it works, and then we will go and discuss specific fields. So let me, without further ado, bring this up here, go to the beginning, and go. Okay, so
you might want to go to full screen, Clemens. There you go.
Yep, can you see it? Full screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. All right, so what you see here in the background, by the way, is so I call this Fremont Ranch. That's the name. It's in the northwest corner of South Park, northeast corner of South Park, just on the west side of Mount Evans. It's one of the fields in this area, and this is, we'll get to that area. It's one of the more important areas especially for boulder pilots returning from the Southwest late in the day, and there's always Mount Evans in the way. And if you can't make Mount Evans, you're stuck in South Park. So you definitely want to look at fields in this area. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So here's what let me see how this works. Okay, here's what well, before we get to the agenda, a few words of caution at the beginning. Anything we discuss is really to help each other. So I want to make sure that whatever I say or whatever anybody else says in terms of sharing information about fields, we're sharing this to help each other, not to guarantee that any of these things actually work. So it's very important to remember that it's always the pilot in command that is responsible for the safe conduction of a flight. And only they can judge what fields they feel comfortable using or not using, and they are responsible for researching them. This is just information that may help or may not help, but there is no guarantee whatsoever that any of this is accurate or complete or suitable. And it always obviously depends on a lot of factors whether a field works. It depends on the pilot. It depends on the glider that they fly. It's very different if you fly a Schweizer glider that you can put down in a parking lot, or you fly a heavy two-place ship with water ballast on board. That requires a very, very different landing experience and a different field. Obviously, also no field is as reliable as a public airport. And if we do land in a field that is privately owned, that constitutes trespassing, and obviously should only occur with permission of the landowner or in an emergency. And it's also important to remember that all fields, by definition, are, any information about fields is inherently out of date. So whenever we look at it, it's current at the day we look at it, but the next day it could have changed. There could be equipment in the fields, there could be people in the field, there could be somebody may put up a new house in the field, and people do. So it's very important to remember that any information is always out of date. So with that said, here's the agenda. So we will go and start with why and where do we need knowledge about land out fields? Why establish and maintain a shared land out database as opposed to everybody just doing their own individual efforts? And I will demo, as I said, I will demo a tool that I found to be very useful and that I helped to get translated to English. So there's no commercial interest whatsoever, neither on my part nor on the part of the people that are operating it. But they've kindly helped get it translated to English. And if we want to use it, we can use it. So I will demo that, and we'll see how it works and how to upload a field. And Charlie Gillespie has given me permission to upload one of his outlandings to one of those fields, and I'll show you how that works with the tool. And then we will get into a discussion of specific fields based on where we need them, and then close with review this topic of how much interest is there in maintaining a crowdsourced effort. So why do we need fields? You might say, I only land at the airport, so why do I need to worry about land out fields? And as Armand said, I mean, it's always best to land at an airport and to be able to land at an airport. But anyone who has flown from Boulder to Salida or from Boulder to Pikes Peak, or knows that there are no airports. So once you're out of glide range, you're out of glide range. And where we fly, the airports are not conveniently located along the best lines of lift, and you'll see that in a moment where we fly. And there can be long stretches where the next airport is far away, and we always obviously have to keep a safely landable spot in glide, and those spots can be few and far between, especially in the mountains. And when you're getting low in a glider, that is not the time to figure out where the next field is, if there are very few fields around, or if there aren't any fields in the vicinity. So you really need to know where you can land. I would never fly across South Park, as this is the picture that you can see here. So this is, right just a little bit to the east of Fairplay. I'm at 17,000 feet. It looks great. The sky looks great. There's clouds, there's lift, but I would never fly here if I didn't know where I could land. And, Buena Vista, you might say Buena Vista is in glide. Well, maybe, maybe not, right? It depends on the air between now and the ridge. There's let me see if I can find the pointer here. Annotate, no, not, it's the pointer. Pointer, spotlight, okay. Spotlight. All right, can you see the pointer? Yeah. So this ridge here, that's the ridge to the Arkansas Valley. And Buena Vista is right behind there. So I might be able to make it over that ridge from this altitude, or I might not. So it's if I wouldn't fly in this area if I didn't know where I could land if I fly across South Park. So that's why we need to prepare before we fly. So where do we fly? So I think you'll be interested in this chart. I found it fascinating putting it together. This is basically, I looked at the last years, and OLC limits you how many flights you can download. So I just picked flights as I was looking at long flights, and I looked at flights that looked interesting to me from any of these 6 locations: Boulder, Owl Canyon, Kelly, Steamboat, Rifle, and Salida. And I just picked randomly a number of long flights that looked interesting, and I plotted it on this chart. And so what you can see is we fly pretty long, pretty far and wide. Boulder is here. You see, I put in Colorado so you can see the borders. There's flights going into Utah. There's flights going into New Mexico. There's flights that almost go to Kansas. There's flights going into Nebraska and obviously into Wyoming. I don't think anyone has made it yet to Oklahoma or to Arizona, but those things are within reach for, certainly from some locations, those places might be in reach. However, I think one thing you notice when you look at this chart is that where we fly is above the mountains. And it's not surprising that we fly above the mountains because that's where the lift is best. So you look at this line here, for example, this is the Sangre de Cristos. This is the Savage Range. This is the San Juan Mountains. This is the Front Range. So we basically, a lot of the Boulder flights obviously follow the Front Range in north-south direction. And then even the flights that go west, flights from Rifle, they follow the mountain ridge out towards Utah. And if people fly to the east, they also fly above the mountain ranges. Here is the San Luis Valley. So there's no surprise that very few people fly over the San Luis Valley. And this is the South Park. So sometimes you can cross South Park. Sometimes it's a bit of an adventure to cross South Park if you fly directly across it. Most of the flight traces follow the mountains that are surrounding it. So not surprisingly, we fly above the mountains because that's where the lift is best. This is the same information as on the previous chart. This is more for information for your interest. It doesn't have specifically to do with landouts, but these are the 6 different locations, and you can see that each of those charts is drawn to scale, so on the same scale, so you can see where people fly from each of those airports. And I will make this presentation available to anyone who's interested, so I don't want to belabor it at this point, but I think you'll find it interesting. So where do we need specific fields? So the whole question about where, that's really critical. So as I said, we fly over the mountains, and here I've taken a Google map basically and divided it into 3 sections: the northern section, the central section, the southern section. And Boulder is kind of the dividing line between the north and the central, and Salida is kind of the dividing line between the central and the south. And most of our flights are, as I mentioned, along the mountains. So these are these light green shaded routes. So where do we need fields? We need fields when we are far away. Well, we'll get to that on the next page, I think, in more detail. You'll see it. We will now go into each of these 3 sections so I can explain this a little better. So this is the northern section. And you can see Boulder is down here at the right-hand corner. Laramie is up here. Saratoga is up here. Here's Steamboat. So Mika out here, Kremling. So for orientation, most of our flying is along these green routes. Obviously a few miles to the west, a few miles to the east, a few miles south or north, depending on the specific weather and where the convergence lines set up. And they can set up, but they usually set up parallel to the mountains. So where do we need fields? Well, the airports that you can see are not where we fly. So the airports can be pretty far away. So you look at this area here, for example, to the north. If you fly over Red Feather Lakes, the next airport is pretty far away. If you fly, as I mentioned, we'll get to South Park later on the middle section. So, so where we need fields is where we are far away from airports. You can see this here. we also need them where we are flying terrain transitions. So for example, some of our flight routes cross sort of lower lying areas. So this is one area where we cross a lower lying area. And if you look at flight traces that cross this area, you will find that people are really high here, and then they get really low here, and then they get high here. And that's not surprising because these lower lying areas are generally not as active in terms of lift. So you need places to land if you fly across the transition and you can't make it to the other side. If you get stuck here, you get stuck low and you can't reconnect, the weather turns and you may have to land out. So that's one of those areas. Or in mountain valleys where the next airport is far away. So this one is a classic example. It's the Laramie River Valley, and is not particularly landable. So this is a very tricky area where this area is another critical area. So if you basically fly over Estes Park, you fly over the mountains on this ridge, and then you see a cloud that looks like it's here. You fly to that cloud, and there is no lift under this cloud. And you're dropping below the ridge here, and you're dropping below the ridge here. So I don't want to be in that situation ever, to be here. But if you're here, and you might be able to make it to Granby, or you might not be able to make it to Granby. So it would be really nice if there was a field right here where I knew I could land just in case. So this is not about promoting landing out, quite the contrary. But it is it is necessary to know if you get low in this area, what would you do? And knowing where the fields are, where you could land, is really helpful as you fly cross country. So it's those, and then also exits of canyons. So for example, if you get, happened to me, you get reasonably low in this area. Well, you don't want to fly over the ridge here because that ridge looks a little high. So then you're sort of gradually moving out here, and you could immediately go and fly out to an airport, but then you're out and landing. If you want to save your flight, you want to stay over the hills for as long as possible. And if you knew that there are good opportunities to land in this area, you can stay over the hills and try and find lift before you commit to flying out to an airport to land. So those are all important things. Also, when we've come back, this is more for boulder pilots, but when we come back at the end of the day and from the west and we have to cross the divide, there's a possibility either there's bad weather on the east side and you can't come back, or you get there, you get to the divide and you can't find the lift to cross it anymore because the day is dying. And you might be trying here. Well, in this case, you've got Granby, but what if you come back from the northwest and you try and cross over here? Well, it would be really nice to have an airport, have a place to land, for example, in this particular area. So let me to the next one. So there's a few private airports. These are in blue now that I would consider pretty reliable. And what I mean with pretty reliable is they're reasonably well maintained. And when you get there, you can sort of expect in most cases that it will actually work. Still not as good as a public airport, and no guarantee whatsoever. But if you show up, it's likely that you're going to be able to land in those places. But they're few and far between, so there aren't many of those. And then we'll get into this chart later. So this is now I'm plotting the fields that I sent you in the Word document. And we will discuss these fields later on. And the goal is to identify the areas where we really need the fields. And then for each of the areas where we really need a field, find the best field or the best fields that work for that particular area, as opposed to randomly looking across Colorado for fields. It's a much more strategic, focused effort where we should look at where we are most likely to need fields, and then which ones are the best fields in those particular areas. So this is the Central Mountains. So now you have Boulder up here. You've got Salida here, Montrose and Gunnison. So the I-70 corridor is right here. So now you have what you see here is these are the areas where we are most likely to need fields. So there's this big area of South Park that I mentioned before. Really deserves special attention because it's 10,000 feet high. It's surrounded by high terrain on all sides, and there's no public airport. So where we can land in South Park is really important for anyone who's flying either south or who's flying, to the southwest, basically along this corridor. If you're over these ridges, there's usually airports that are in glide. So Salida, Buena Vista, Leadville are usually in glide. So I'm not super keen on fields discussion between Buena Vista and Salida because in most cases, for example, those airports will be in glide. A problem area is this valley here. This is Silverthorne, Dillon. If you're flying out this direction to the southwest, you get low in this area. Well, there's Kremling, which is all the way to the top. And you might be able to make it, or you might not be able to make it. So if you're below these ridge lines and you can't climb up above the ridge line anymore, it's really good to know where you can land in this valley. And the same goes for the valley that goes out here to Eagle. I think the Eagle Valley. The valley here from Aspen to Glenwood. I mean, you've got the Aspen Airport, which is good to know and good to have. And then you have no airport until you get to Glenwood Springs. This is a nasty area here. This is Taylor Reservoir. So this is just on the west side of the Savage Range. You don't want to really drop low into this valley. So it could be a real problem. Okay, so, and then again, here the private airports, the good private airports, and we'll discuss those later. And then here again, here's all the fields that are on the sheet that I sent you, and we will get and discuss them and try and find the best ones for the critical areas. And the same for the south. So this is the Southern Mountains. So now you have Salida at the top. This is the Sangre de Cristo range. You're getting into, this is the border to New Mexico here. So you're getting into New Mexico. Taos is a little bit further south. This is the Southern San Juan Mountains, the San Juan Mountains, the Northern San Juan Mountains, a lot of 14ers here. As from Tom Zellner's presentation, you might remember, these are probably the most inhospitable flying area in all of Colorado. And I have not done a lot of research in this area. It shows that my ambitions aren't that great yet, but we'll see. So basically what we want to do is, again, look at the areas where we most likely need fields. So for example, here's the Sangre de Cristo range. What if you drop off on this side of the Sangre de Cristo range? Where can you go? What if you drop off on the east side of the Sangre de Cristo range? Where can you go? And, so you get the idea. So here this is complicated by the fact that some of the airports, so for example, these are public airports, Saguache, Blanca, and there's one that I can't read here, Cuchara Valley out here. Those are public airports, but they look very sketchy to me if I look at them online. So I want to actually see if there's expertise from people on this call, whether those airports are suitable and landable for 50-meter gliders, 18-meter gliders, or gliders with bigger spans. These are pretty narrow airports, and they look in reasonably poor shape. Okay, so why establish a common database? So why should we work on this together? I mean, first of all, we know that the condition of fields must be updated, and they constantly are out of date. So if you don't do it every few years at least, you really can't rely on anything anymore. So I had David Kinzel and Kurt sent me some emails, and they did some research on fields that are in their database to the northeast. and the majority of the fields that are in that database, in that old database, are completely not usable anymore. So they still exist on databases. They still exist. So if you download the waypoint file that dates back to 2005, they still exist in those waypoint files. They even exist on the sectional. Even if you buy a new sectional, there's a lot of airports that you see on the sectional that are not usable anymore. So updating this is really important. And then different people have different knowledge of specific areas. And so by working together, we can tap into that knowledge. Having a standard framework would help us make a better assessment and allow for better comparisons. And then obviously it's impractical for any one person to regularly visit all those fields across Colorado on a regular basis. I mean, that maybe someone can do this, but I think most of us would rather not. So it's by sharing, it basically would be a lot less time consuming than if we do it ourselves. Obviously, that doesn't remove from anyone the responsibility. So anyone who's flying, they're always solely responsible for the fields that they use and assess, and any information that they can obtain from anybody else is only there to help them, but it's not to take any responsibility away from them. Okay, so I want to show you a tool that I found very useful for this effort, and I had not seen anything like it before. So let me try and see if I can find this. I might have to stop sharing and then share again. So stop sharing and share again. Okay, let me make this a bit bigger so I can see it too. Okay, so this is the tool. This is basically, it's hosted by a group of soaring pilots in Europe, and it contains fields for the Alps, for Namibia, for Spain, and I've just begun to upload some of my fields for Colorado, so they have helped upload the airports for our area. And I just want to show you how it works, and you can decide for yourself if this is something that you would find useful or not. It obviously is not useful if one person uses it. I would not use this for myself. This is a tool, it's crowdsourced, and it really helps if multiple people use it and share information. So if there's not interest here, I will not keep uploading my flights. So here's how it works. So here's a toggle. So if you get to this site and it just all looks German, then you will find a UK flag up here. Just click on that UK flag and the screen will go to English. I helped them get it translated to English over the last few weeks. So they needed it in English too, because for Namibia, they needed it in English. And also for Spain, they just added Spain, as I mentioned. And then if there is sort of map area, so you just click on the US flag here. And if you click on the US flag, it basically takes you to our area. And what you see now is a map. Here's Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas, Wyoming. What you can see is a map, and the blue dots are mostly those are the public airports. The blue and the yellow question marks, they're not 100% right yet, so I'll have to work with them to fix it. But it's mostly there. And then what you find is, what you can see is these are fields that I have uploaded. So these are the yellow dots and the green dots and the red dots that are solid without a question mark. That's how a field shows up when you upload it. And whether it's green or yellow or red depends on the assessment. So if it's a good option for a land out, it will show up in green. It will show up in yellow if it's sort of cautionary. So as I mentioned, if you want like hay fields, I would put with a caution, because if you show up and there's tall hay in the field and you can't really use it, it's not good. But a hay field that is freshly plowed is really good. So it's kind of can be in between. And then you've got red dots that are only for emergencies. So these are fields that are so bad that you really don't want to land there. But it may still be better to know where they are. If you download, this is one of the features on the site, you can actually download a CUP file that will get you the access to these fields. The red dots will not show up on that CUP file. So the red dots are only for your research and they will not appear on the CUP file. Personally, I've got my own CUP file with the red dots, but I don't mark them in my waypoint file as landout fields. I only mark them as waypoints with a question mark. So I know where they are, but I don't want the flight computer to direct me to any of them. I still want to know where they are. So this is the map. So if you research it, basically this is how you use it. You go to the map and then you click on a field. So you click on the green dot. And then basically what pops up, can you see this? What pops up is a little preview window. It gives you the name of the field, the altitude, and the ranking. This text appears to be in German here, so this is just a little bug. We'll fix it that this can become English, but it's not important. So you go to, there's a go to button, and then you can go to the details. So you get this preview window, you click on go to, and then you basically get to the field. And when you get to the field, you have at the top here, you have a Google map that shows the just the broader location of where the field is. So you can zoom in and out here